Hello and welcome to Meet Your Inspiration podcast with Meri and Rich. Here we're talking about inspiration, motivation, and empowerment. Our guests are ordinary people who became extraordinary, and sharing their stories, we want to help you to become the person you want to be and to go beyond your dreams. As everybody can notice, today we are all on code pink because our guest is the lady in pink. Rebecca Shannon is today with us, and she is a lovely mom of three boys. She's a coach, author, leadership speaker, and leadership coach. And she's the queen of the heart-led leadership. That's love right. That. Yeah. And miracle maker, and most probably much more, but we're going to find out in the conversation. Welcome, Rebecca, and thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, and what a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. And thank you for the pinkness. I love it.
That's
welcome to our podcast. Yeah,
thank you,
Richard. Great to meet you, Rebecca.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, finally, yeah.
We, as everybody know, this podcast, we don't have any script going back and it's all going absolutely
easy and free.
And we always share a bit more about how we actually met our guests. And this story is really nice because I know Rebecca for more than 3 years, because very often we were spending the times next to the football pitch, but we never spoke more about, rather than the usual morning conversations or football or boys. But something happened earlier this year where I've seen a lovely post and I received a really nice invitation from Rebecca to go on her reading of a book. We want to share with you this, as you can see here as well, and we're going to tell you a bit more. I'll leave Rebecca to speak more about that, but I'm going to tell you that something is really touching about the book and the stories was this is an empowering collection of inspirational and moving stories full of courage, strength, and heart. If I must be honest, when I've seen Rebecca's invitation, my first thought was like, wow, definitely, yes, I'm in. Because this is my thing. I managed to go, and that was one beautiful afternoon where we've been surrounded by amazing people. Rebecca, you've got great people around you. I'll leave you to tell us a bit more how actually one woman from Faversham ended up to be an international author in a best-selling book, if I'm not wrong.
Absolutely, yeah. In many countries.
Yes, so tell us the story, how you end up there.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I mean, what a lovely introduction. I really had a little moment when you were saying about the afternoon for the book reading. But yeah, I think the first thing I'd love to share is about the story about how we met. So, both have sons who play football. Compliment Coaching, my company, sponsors the football team. And yeah, we stood on many pitches, like you say, talking about the usual things on a Saturday morning, football, boys, school, all of those things, and never really spoken to each other about anything else. And when we'd had a Christmas party get together, the girls, the year before, the football mums the year before. So I had like a WhatsApp group of all the mums that were in the football team. And when I wrote the book and wrote the chapter in the book, I decided to celebrate it, because I think one of the things that we can forget to do in life is celebrate our achievements, especially when we've done something pretty extraordinary, right? We can feel a little bit like, should I be saying anything? Should I wait until someone asks me about it? And I thought, no, this has been a massive story that took me to writing the chapter, and I wanted to celebrate it, and I wanted to celebrate it locally. Really wanted to celebrate it in my home. Got a beautiful Creekside home in Faversham, and with enough space to have a bit of a launch party. So I put together the afternoon. So the idea was that people would come and share with me. I'd read the story and I'd tell a little bit about my life. And so as I was going through like who I wanted to invite, I thought, well, I've got to invite my local mums that I know who probably don't know this about me, right? Don't know. And I think I sent the invitation. I think you responded in like 5 seconds, was like, yes, I'm in. And by the way, do you know what I do? And you told me about the podcast, and hence why we're here today. But I think it's just it really speaks to me about, one, celebrating our achievements in life, right? And also like sharing our stories with people in all our places in life. I'm a coach, I work with a lot of companies, I do a lot on social media, I put out there what it is that I do, but I forget sometimes to have those conversations with the person stood next to me on the football pitch on a Saturday morning, or when I'm in the supermarket. And it really was a great example to me of how when we share our stories with people that are near to us, it can create something special.
I think that's really quite common as well, because often we're, particularly I think in this country, particularly, we're great when we're abroad. We go on holiday, and all of a sudden we have this amazing confidence. We're sitting next to another couple and someone in a bar, and we all start chatting. If we walked into a bar in this country, or we're sitting in a restaurant and someone's sitting next to you, you wouldn't dream of talking to them. It was quite completely alien. So I can understand that dynamic. Now, Rebecca, from going from coaching and mentoring and going through everything you're doing in your daily, how did you decide to start to write the book? What was that? Because that's a big thing to suddenly start to write a book.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a childhood dream for me. Basically, when I was young, like from really young, I read and I wrote a lot. Right, I was a bit of an insomniac when I was younger, so I read a lot of books. So by the age of like 8, I was reading very adult books because I'd read everything else. And then life happens, and we can talk a bit about everything that happens in the interim. But come back to where I am now, and having created a coaching business and done some extraordinary things, this idea of writing just sort of kept coming back into my head, that I really wanted to write a book. I read prolifically, and I read a lot of books by a lot of people who are in my world now. You mentioned earlier, I'm surrounded by amazing people, and so there was just this little nudge of like, writing. And then literally within a couple of weeks of kind of having that thought, and this is often what happens when we start putting out to the universe what it is that we want, I had 2 things occur. One was a coach I was working with at the time said, I'm working with this really cool writing coach. I think you'd enjoy her classes. Wow. So that was one thing that happened. And then the second thing was the publisher of the book there, John Spender. So it's a series of books. The Journey of Riches is a series of books. He is this amazing guy who's his mission in life is just to get people's stories out there to inspire others. Exactly what you guys are doing, right? And he approached me after seeing my stuff on social media and said, look, I think you're someone who would be good for this book series. Would you like to have a chat? And I must admit, my first thought was a little bit cynical, like, oh, what's the catch? Again, very British thing to do. Someone says, hi, I'd love to speak to you. And you're like, oh, what do they want? And I thought, no, drop that, because you want to write. So I got on a call with him. I spoke to a couple of the other authors who'd done books with him before. And everyone was just like, oh my God, 1, you'll love writing the book. 2, it's an amazing experience to be part of it. And 3, John is just one of the most special people in the world. So I was like, okay, this sounds like my kind of place to be. And so I spoke to John and signed up. So basically the book is a series, and then each book has a different theme. And this one was elevating your life. So we got on a call, and John was like, so how have you elevated your life? And I told the story of going over to Phoenix and meeting the ultimate coach.
I just want to stop here for a second.
Yeah.
And I want to tell where they can find the book. Amazon?
Amazon, yeah. Amazon is the main place, yeah.
And 2 important things. I read half of the stories in this book, and I listen to Rebecca reading her story, and I want to tell you that it's a really inspirational story. Please go and find the book, because as well, I think all the money are going for...
Yeah, it goes towards a orphanage in Thailand, I believe. So, and where they're really making sure that those children have...
Good cause.
Yeah, it's a really good cause,
You will help a good cause, and you will definitely get a lot about it. Me and Richard will be very pleased, because we had a special signed book by Rebecca. But yes, the stories are definitely stories to empower your soul.
Yeah. And so in line with what you guys do in this podcast, there are stories. And this is one of the things that I've learned with a lot of the amazing people that I have in my world, both locally and all over the world, which is one of the things that's made my life extraordinary, is I'm connected now with so many people all around the globe, is that, you know what, every time you hear these people's stories, they are extraordinary people, and everyone is. And that's one of the biggest things that I found is, they're doing extraordinary things, but when you really listen to their stories, they're ordinary people.
Exactly.
Right? Everyone in that book is an ordinary person who's lived a life with extraordinary things happening to them. And then what I love most is people who then start creating a world from that experience, from the things that have happened in their lives. And some of them, are, my story is not particularly traumatic. I don't believe. Some are really traumatic.
Yours is really inspiring, and to show people that sometimes when you've got to go, but it's not just to have the go and to sit on the couch. You have to have the go, and you have to be brave to go and follow your heart and your thoughts. The miracle is coming. It's just
you've got to show up. You've got to show up and be open for it.
I absolutely love your determination. You just had it in your head, and that's it. Obviously, I'm pretty sure it wasn't easy decision. I'm sure that you were going through your ups and downs, but it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think that's something else to share. Whether your story is traumatic or not, whatever your story is, it's happening. It's happening in your world. And I did another podcast recently where I was talking about my story and what I've accomplished in life. And the guy interviewing me, Nick Smith, who's another great person in my life, another author, he wrote an amazing book called The Giants and Smalls. So I do plug books a bit. I'm not getting any financial reward. I just love these books. He wrote this book, and when we were talking, one of the things he captured, which I thought was really powerful, and I kind of missed it, was I was telling my story and all the things that had happened. And yes, my life has not been traumatic, but I've suffered loss and heartbreak and separation and divorce and financial problems and all the things that are very ordinary for all of us. And one of the things he caught when I was telling him what else I'd created in my life was he picked up this phrase of even though. He was like, and it really touched me when he reflected it back to me. It was like, even though all of these things have occurred, this is what you've then gone and created. And
it's like another stepping stone, isn't it? Even though it's like a stepping stone,
absolutely.
You're stood and you're moving to that next level.
Yeah, and always. You could choose not to, right? Like you said, you could go through the motions, you could go through life, and you could just stop showing up.
Well, the easiest thing is to curl up in a ball, isn't it, and just feel sorry for yourself.
Yeah, and listen, I think there's a nuance here, because for some of my life, I didn't curl up in a ball and do nothing. I was still very active. I was still very out there, but there was a different energy about it. I was showing up because I had no choice. I was showing up because I felt like that was all I could do. But what's happened in the last probably 8 years of my life is I haven't curled up in a ball. I'm showing up, and I've learned that I can create my life any way I like. And my extraordinary, I talk about my life now as being extraordinary. Other people might look at it and go, it's not that extraordinary, right? You're not a multimillionaire. You don't have a flash car, any of those things. They could say that. But to me, when I sit and look at my life, it is now extraordinary. And that's a shift from when I was still showing up. I was still doing what I needed to do, but I didn't have that idea of creation and of extraordinary. I was just surviving, right? So I've never been someone who's curled up in a ball and not shown up, but there's a really big difference of how I'm showing up now. In my life before, I just didn't have that concept of creating.
But there's a humility in that, and I think that's important. I think it's important to have humility, because, like, if we don't have that, sometimes we know how to do things, but if we have that inner insecurity, and it's a bit like an actor going on the stage, or like someone singing. Before they go on, however good they are at singing, they will always have an element of nerves, and I think we all have that in life to a certain degree. And if you go out and you think you're invincible, to be fair, that's when you're actually more vulnerable, because it's easier to be pulled down, and I think that's a good thing.
And I think you're right. And I often talk to my clients when we're talking about like that idea of going a bit further than they've ever been before, a bit out of their comfort zone, trying something new, is, to me, like the energy of excitement and nerves are very similar. If you actually think about the feeling of excitement and nerves, they're actually the same feeling. So this again is a point at which we can create something, is we create it as being exciting. Right. And we can literally shift ourselves. And I've done things, that are, and I've always done them, I think, is the other thing I've realized. When I look back on my life, I can see how I've always had this element, didn't necessarily recognize it, but where I've always been able to step into that feeling as being something that will call me forward. And again, other people will think that's not that extraordinary to do that. But for me, and I love your title of this, is Beyond Our Dreams. Nobody else gets to tell me or you or anybody else what your dreams are.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody gets to tell you what your extraordinary life is. Nobody gets to tell you whether what you're doing and stepping into is brave and courageous, because the only person that can know that is me. And there are things that other people do that I think are unbelievably brave and courageous, but they're not things that I feel called to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel a need to do them because other people are doing them. It's what feels like that for me. And I think this is why things like, conversations like this for ordinary people is you get to choose what's extraordinary in your life. So if you decide that writing a chapter in a book is an extraordinary thing you can do it. If actually the extraordinary thing is to go to a bar and talk to the person next to you, and that's stepping out of your comfort zone, and that's extraordinary for you, then I would look at that and go, oh my gosh, you have just done something extraordinary. And I think that's really important, because like you said, there's a lot in the world where it's like we have to be invincible and we have to be out there doing, being on social media or doing incredible things or running the most successful business, being the best paid coach in the world, or any of those things, which great if that's your thing. But what about all the other things that we can just do, just show up for? Right. And that to me has been a real
this is
part of my work, but part of my work for me, and then part of what I bring to other people as well.
No, it is. There was a really lovely American couple on your reading day.
Yes.
Which were honestly, these people just them sitting there, they radiate calm and pureness. And just tell us quickly about them, because I've seen them on social media.
Minda and Todd. So to give a bit of context to this, when I did the book reading, so basically I've got a beautiful creekside house, which is very great big space, and I have these two brilliant balconies that overlook the creek on one side and the car park on the other. Not so nice, but hey. So the day that I had, it was beautiful weather, wasn't it? It was during the summer, so I had everything open up and have everyone here, and I just invited lots of people to be in my world. And the idea was just that we had food and we had drinks and things. And I had my beautiful singing teacher. You mentioned singing earlier. Yeah. Singing is something I do as well. So my singing teacher, Naomi, was there, and she was singing, and then I did some songs with her as well, which is one of my brave things to do, sing in front of other people, and then read the book. And when I was planning it, again, how these synchronicities show up, I'd been to an event in May in Birmingham, the Ultimate Coach Experience event and I'd re-met Minda and Todd there, who I'd originally met when I was over in Phoenix having my extraordinary adventure to go and see the Ultimate Coach. And we'd talked then, so this was the previous January, that they were literally selling up everything in America. They live in Phoenix. Their kids are grown up. They were selling up everything, and they were going on this sort of worldwide tour. They just decided to go and explore themselves, the world, what might be possible. So they were planning this tour and doing like workaways. So, where you can go and stay somewhere, but you look after the land or the animals or things like that. Wow. So they didn't really know. It was just like, we're just going to sort of do one thing after another. And they're both incredible people. Minda is an amazing coach and healer. And so when we were in Phoenix together, I said to them, look, I've got a cottage in Wales. If you're coming over, let me know, and you can go and stay there for a bit and what have you. Because I didn't at that point have a home that was big enough to host people. Anyway, fast forward to May in Birmingham when we met again, and they were already in the UK. And I was like, what are your plans? I said, because I now have a home that, I'd love you to come and stay with me. And they were like, oh my gosh, we've got a week that's free. And it happened to coincide with the book reading. And the book reading was all about going to Phoenix, meeting Steve Hardison, who's the ultimate coach. And I met them the day before in Phoenix. So it was just perfect. Wow. So they came and stayed with me. As I say, Minda is an incredible coach. They've been to India, they've been to France and Spain. They've been everywhere, spent a lot of time in the UK. I think Minda at the moment is in France again, actually, not sure where Todd is at the moment, but they are a really good example of the people that I now have in my world. They are just the most loving, caring, kind. I mean, they came and stayed with me for a week, and Todd, who's Minda's husband, he was so lovely to have in my home as a really good example for me and my boys, actually, who were there as well, of a really kind, strong, masculine energy. You know, he really
But
took care,
well.
and a gentleman, and he took care of us. He cooked for us. You know, he hung out with the boys, like Noah, my middle child. Like one night he had all his friends round for a sleepover, and I woke up at one point and the music was a bit loud. So I sort of said, no, the music's loud. He said, oh, I don't know. I'm downstairs with Todd. We're all hanging out with Todd. And it was just so nice to have my house with them in it, with that masculine energy, really kind. And then going back to the book reading, to have my house full of these amazing people, all from all over the world and very locally, just experiencing my story, being with me. We had such a beautiful afternoon. It was wonderful.
Exactly that, you said
I did, because I was just the minute when early in this conversation you talk about this, probably we'll say the law of attraction.
Yeah,
I definitely believe in this on 100%. Wherever we put in thoughts and we really work through it, since this project is in, so many amazing people we start to meet, we start to be invited, we start to go. And obviously we are making the step as well, because as you spoke earlier, I had this I do like people and to be surrounded by people, but I had this problem to go and reach to them. But lately I started, and obviously that's why my reaction to your message was, oh no, that's my energy, I'm going. I don't. Before I walk in your house, I just stopped there and I was like, oh, what am I gonna do here? I just know Rebecca by hello, how.
And that's the same with the networking events. When we go to a networking event, we have the same. You know, I mean, we went.
But it's creating. This is bringing. Yeah. I met actually Claire, the
Katie.
Naomi's friend. That they
yes, yes.
She was literally. Then she said, "Oh, you're wearing pink, so we're going to the same place." And I said, "Yes, obviously we are."
Yeah.
And this is how we met. And then in the minute I walk in, I could recognize this couple from America. They just, they were
made you
just
feel relaxed.
But no, they just the smile, the way how they talk, it's just different. And the energy in the house was, people may think I'm crazy, but there was a full of amazing energy.
And listen, I was, I was there, obviously. It really blew me away that day, actually, because there was a real mix of people. Like I say, there were people that I wouldn't normally share this with, and to have created that energy. I mean, I've been to some amazing events through the Ultimate Coach and very other various things I do in my coaching world, like big events and things, and felt that energy. The day that I created that in my home, and when I say created, I co-created it with everybody who showed up in my home, was just incredible. And it really, again, this idea of like this extraordinary life we can create in very ordinary ways. It really blew me away. And I had a real mix of people. There were a couple of mums from the football.
Yeah, there were people that know you from.
Yeah, there were the other people I'd met. There were friends. My sons were there. There was a neighbour who literally had moved in to one of the houses, and I'd happened to bump into them the day before, and I just said, I'm doing this thing on Saturday. Do you want to come along? Or Sunday, I think it was. Come along. Never met these people before, and yet they came along. And then, as you say, what happens then as well is you start finding out about what other people are up to in the world. So the neighbour that I've got, he's a photographer, quite a really good photographer, and he's done a lot of photography in print, but now he's moving to digital because obviously everything's moving to digital. And we were talking about the challenges of that. Connected with him, I had amazing conversations with people I've known for years, but because I'd invited them into a space that was created very differently, that we were talking about these extraordinary things that I'd done in my life, suddenly these people start opening up and sharing with me what they're doing, right? Which is what happened with us. And as you say, the law of attraction, manifestation, whatever you want to call it, I totally believe in. I mean, God, the magic and miracles that happen in my life, I have this thing like my fingertips tingle when I do. But the magic happens when you show up. If you just sit on your sofa at home thinking, oh yeah, I'd really love to have these incredible people in my life, or I'd really love to have these amazing adventures, and you don't take any steps towards it, it doesn't happen, right? And this is where I think people get confused by this. It's like, as if just sitting here thinking this stuff is going to show up. No, it's not. You have to show up in it. And that might be showing up in conversations with people that you meet in the coffee shop. It might be writing a chapter in a book. It might be putting a post out on social media. It might be anything that you think of.
Just when the opportunity comes,
absolutely,
don't always ignore and say no to the little things. Just
say yes.
Be brave
right?
and say yes.
Yeah, say yes. And that, I went through a year, when was that? 2019, where I consciously said, I'm just going to say yes to everything, right? Just going to say yes and see what happens, right? And that was a lot, that created a lot of momentum for my business, for what I was, was wanting to create in the world. And sometimes those yeses were a bit counterintuitive. I can't afford it. How am I going to do this? At the time when I started my business and I was, training to be a coach and starting a coaching practice, I was a single mum bringing up 3 boys pretty much on my own. Their father was always involved, but they lived with me 95% of the time. And I was already working I was having to work to financially top up what I was being supported with at the time to give me and the boys the life I wanted us to have. So I was working 3 or 4 days a week, 3 children, one of which was 3 at the time.
Wow.
And the others were at school and all of this. I was commuting up to London 3 or 4 times a week and training to be a coach. I mean, it was just totally counterintuitive why I would have done that.
Before you started coaching and you got into coaching and mentoring, what were you doing beforehand? What was your base sort of starting point?
So I worked in recruitment for pretty much all of my life. So after leaving uni, I worked in a sports shop for a while, ran sports shops, which now sports director was sport and ski at the time. So I managed and ran sports shops when I left university. I did that quite a lot when I was at university, which meant I didn't quite get as good a degree as I might have done because I was working pretty much full time.
Saturdays and Sundays.
And the week, and running shops, And so I did that for a bit. I worked for Abbey National, the old Abbey National, for a bit as a financial advisor.
Right.
And then I fell into recruitment, which most people, if you talk to them about recruitment, nobody decided to be in recruitment. We all fell into it by mistake. And then 30 years later, I still work very much within the recruitment industry. So a lot of my clients are, so I coach people. Yeah. Wow. Actually, nearly 30. I think it's 27. 27, 28 years. So a lot of the people that I work with now are recruitment leaders, owners, and businesses. I don't exclusively work in recruitment, but that's my network over the last 30 years. So I work with Hays, one of the big recruiters, for 15 years. And I started as a consultant. And then basically, I wasn't very good at selling, which essentially recruitment is, to some nuance around that, but it is. So it wasn't my thing. And I basically I had the best career ever in there, because I became, they didn't have a title for it at the time, but I basically became a project manager. Because I went and worked with the directors on everything that supported recruiters being able to do what they did. So I worked on tech projects. I worked on training and coaching projects. I worked on legislative changes that had to be made, and I worked with the creme de la creme of our senior leadership team.
Wow.
So basically I learned everything about recruitment, or breadth and depth of it. And it was an incredible career. And Hays, I have so much to thank Hays for. I won't go into the things that I don't thank them quite so much for, but generally I have a lot to thank them for. I had an amazing boss called Andy Skopiak, who was just so inspirational to work with. I worked with many of the great leaders, and it just gave me this opportunity to work with some really innovative, inspirational people, and basically run these amazing projects. What I realized when I look back on it, is all the way through that, coaching was a thread. So one of the reasons I was so successful at my job, there were 2 main reasons. One was I coached people. So people in the project team, I coached them. That's how I got them to deliver on what I wanted them to do. And I also realized now, looking back, and the guys that I worked with, most of them would say this too, is I actually coached the people that I was working for as well, because they would come to me with ideas and we'd work through them. And I realise now that I was coaching up as much as I was coaching.
But that shows
across.
Real leadership skills within what you're doing. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that was one of my superpowers, and again, it ties in with what I do now, is I had this ability, and I didn't see it at the time as a superpower, I didn't really see it now, is I was really good at the big picture. Yeah. And I was also really good at the detail. Now, you'll know, because you've been in industry for many years as well, you don't get many of those people in the world who can really have the inspirational vision and get the big picture and be able to go into the detail. And that was what made me so successful in the roles that I did. And actually the leadership quality. Again, when I look back over my jobs, every single job I had from when I was 14, I'd end up in a leadership role.
And that's
just by showing up.
That's just as important. I mean, you mentioned about I think that's really important in sales, because you need to be able to do the detail, but you also need to be able to lead the client and the person in the direction.
Yeah.
And
that's where a lot of salespeople fall down.
Yeah, because they're talking about a product. They just talk about X.
Yeah.
But actually, it's integrating the whole thing, and that's what makes a difference.
Yeah. And I still talk about that now, with the recruitment, leaders that I work with, and actually it's a big thing at the moment. I'm doing quite a lot of talks and things within the recruitment industry because it's struggling at the moment. And a lot of it, I believe, is we've lost some of that leadership skills in sales, in the recruitment process, with everything that's coming with AI and automation and all of this. Too much is being done that
automatically
way,
and
not enough. We're people, and we're selling people to other people within recruitment. That's what we're doing. It's not even a product; it's a person. It's a human being that you're then putting into another human with another human being. And I think we've lost some of the magic that I really believe, and I talk a lot about this with recruitment leaders, is you are finding people the vehicle that's going to create the life that they want to live, and you're also finding the people that, for companies, these companies are innovating, and they're making products that make people's lives possible. There aren't many companies that you think about that don't have an impact on somebody's life somewhere. They're not just doing this, they're making books, they're creating the tech that's recording this for us. They're, all of these things, and we forget that when we're recruiting people. And if we could just bring some of that magic back into these relationships when we're talking to clients. Absolutely. What is it you're trying? Why are you recruiting this person?
And a bit more personal touch, I would say, from point of view of person not born.
Yes, absolutely.
Here, but...
So I'm trying to think back to the original question, Rich. How did I get where I am? So I did that for many years at Hayes, and then after 15 years with them, I had at the time 2 small children. I was working, going up to London. And I got to the stage where I wasn't really enjoying it anymore. I needed something different. My father had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. We were trying to move them nearer to us in Kent. They lived in mid Wales at the time. And I just went, you know what, I need to just get out of the corporate world for a while. So the idea was I'd take a year off and do nothing. Yeah. In that year, I did a lot. I'm not very good at doing nothing. I renovated my parents' home in Wales. They moved them to Kent, renovated the home in Wales to be a beautiful cottage that we have as a holiday home and rent out to people. I can't remember what else I did, but during that year, I also then started my own business, which at the time was project management consultancy. So basically what I'd been doing in Hayes, I wanted to offer to local companies who couldn't afford high-end consultancy. Because as you'll know this, you get high-end consultants in business consultants, it costs a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I wanted to do was bring some of that big vision and detail to companies on a really affordable rate. And I did for 2 or 3 years, and then I ended up working back with a lot of recruitment companies. So we were talking about this earlier. I went back and worked for the people that I used to work for, and where that people had left Hayes and gone to other places, I ended up working with them and doing very many contracts over that time. But the day I launched my business, I found out I was pregnant with my 3rd child.
Wow.
Literally the day I just set up the website, had it all ready to launch, and then did a pregnancy test. I was like, I've birthed something else then as well. So my Patrick, who is why we met and plays in the football team, came along. But I still launched my business. I worked right up until I had Patrick, and then after that, I went back in and worked. And unfortunately, I think in that period, what happened was, my father-in-law passed away not long after we got married. Dear friend of mine lost her mum very quickly. A friend that I'd worked with at Hayes lost her life in childbirth very quickly. There was a lot of grief, a lot of loss around us. My dad, just before he got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, actually got diagnosed with prostate cancer. And because I'd just lost 2 people very close to me to cancer, of course, as soon as I got that, it was like, I'm going to lose my dad.
Yeah.
Prostate cancer didn't get him, actually. It took many years of Alzheimer's for my dad to pass away. But I wasn't in a very good place. My marriage wasn't great at the time. I ended up working back in some toxic environments where, although I was a consultant, I ended up very much back in an employee kind of mindset. I was working far too many hours. I was commuting up to London. I was drinking too much. I was still showing up for my kids, but I wasn't really showing up in my marriage. I wasn't happy in it.
Sounds like burnout.
It was burnout. It was absolutely burnout. But I didn't know that because I lived in a world where burnout didn't exist. You just keep going. And what we were saying earlier about just keep going and just keep showing up and just keep. And my husband, at the time, he works in construction. He, 2008, he'd lost his job during the crash. It's a very transient market. Huge pressure. So in between him not working, I'd try and work more. And so there was a lot. And I can look back now with so much love and compassion for that woman who was just struggling. I share this story with people, not very often, but when I do, I know it hits hard, and it hits me hard to share it. Was I used to drop my kids, so get up at ridiculous o'clock in the morning, go for a run at literally like 5 o'clock in the morning with a dear friend of mine, Liz, and so that I could be back before my husband got up, had a shower, and went to work, so that I could be back, so I could then have a shower, get my 3 kids organised, drop them off at a childminder at 7:30 in the morning, get on a train to go to London, do a whole day's work in London, get on the train back, pick them up from the childminders. And I was doing this on rinse and repeat. And what a lot of people at the time didn't know was that I used to travel into Stratford, and I'd get off the train and I'd walk through the big shopping mall in Stratford to get to the other side to get then the train into London. And I would stop at the toilets in the thing, and I'd go into the toilets, and I'd go in, I'd sit in the cubicle and cry for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, literally just sobbing. And then I'd go out and I'd put a face on, put my makeup on, put my face on, and then I'd go to work. And I'd spend the whole day worrying about, were the kids okay? Would I get the train okay on the way back? What would happen if I missed the train? My whole day was on this hyper alert. Right. And work was toxic. So every time anyone spoke to me, I felt like I was doing it wrong. I hadn't done enough. And I was working so freaking hard and delivering all sorts of amazing projects. But I was on hyper alert the whole time. Total survival. Right. And then I'd do the reverse on the way home. So I'd come back through. I'd grab cookies for the kids. They remember this now. I used to go to Millie's Cookies, and I'd get a really thick milkshake for me and cookies for the kids. And then I'd go to the toilet, cry, and then take my face off ready to go home and sit on the train the whole way home like, am I going to get there? Is the train going to be delayed? What's happening? And I was doing this as my marriage was falling to bits as well, and I knew that was happening. And then in 2016, I think my husband just realised that this wasn't working for lots of reasons, and so he kind of said, we need to figure this out or I'm going to leave. And I said, I have nothing left to give. I just have nothing. I can't. And my dad by this time was very bad with Alzheimer's. I was burnt out, but I had no idea I was burnt out at the time. I thought I wasn't doing enough. I thought I was a bad mum, bad wife. Blah, blah, blah. And in many ways, my husband made the decision for us, but it was a decision that I think I'd known for a long time, but didn't know how to do anything about it. I was a mum of 3 boys. What was I going to do? So, he left, and that was the start of the journey to where I am today, which was, it was, terribly hard at the time. And 3 young boys, having to get up the next morning and do the same thing that I just explained to you, now knowing that my husband had left, was really tough. But as I say, most people at the time had no idea any of that was going on. What they saw was me doing what I normally did, got up, went to work. And I'm sure my husband felt this as well, actually. I think he thought I just got up the next day and everything was fine. And there was a lot of heartbreak and pain behind the scenes.
Why you didn't
but
nobody share didn't with anyone?
Because I didn't know to in those days. I really didn't know to.
I think it's very hard, actually, in a situation like that, to share your inner thoughts. Yeah. It's like you said, when you're in the toilet and you come out the toilet and you put your face on.
Yeah.
And it's like you come out of the house in the morning and you don't want people to see your vulnerability.
No.
And I think
absolutely.
as humans, and as a male, they're supposed to have this. But I think it's important sometimes to show that we are fragile and we haven't, and all
but
of
everybody
us.
are.
Everybody.
It's just people are either not showing. Because this is the other point of this podcast as well, to show and to let everybody know that it's not only on social media that you see everything is
amazing,
very amazing and sparkle and etc. Because it's not.
No, and I didn't know that then. My way of surviving in the world was to be super strong, super independent. Everything was okay, and I had 3 young kids. There was actually I thought if I went into my vulnerability, I'd curl up in a ball and not do anything. So my way of doing it was to move forward. And that's when I found coaching. I saw an advert one day, and I've just gifted you the book from Joe Martin, who's the leader of One of Many, that said, are you Superwoman? Are you working too hard? Are you burnt out? Are your relationships, collapsing around you? Are you, do you not have any joy in your life? And I was like, oh my God, she's talking to me. This is written just for me.
Sign, probably.
So that was my first interest. So I did some work with One of Many. They did some online stuff. And then again, the universe shows up when you show up, right? They then started licensing people as coaches. So they'd been running a couple of years, and the work that they were doing, the programs that they were doing to get women from surviving to thriving. That was their sort of, way of marketing it. Exactly. Right. And I was like, yes, please, could I thrive rather than survive for a bit? And they started doing these licenses. So you could learn to be a coach for them and run their programs. And I was like, oh, I like this idea. This sounds good. But at the time, like I say, I was a full-time mum, working 3 or 4 days a week, still crying in the toilets most mornings. And I didn't have the money and I didn't have the time. And it was a full-on program that we had to do over, we had to be there for a week and train, and we had to coach people and all of this stuff. And it cost quite a bit of money. So I was really battling with myself. Should I do this? Shouldn't I do it? And then I found a journal that I'd written many years before. And I just found it one day, and I opened up this journal, and this is absolutely true. And this is the magic and miracles and synchronicities that happen to me all the time now. I opened up this page of a journal I'd written probably 5, 6, 7 years before that said, I want to be a coach.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I'll be a coach. And so I signed up and I made it happen. So I certified as a coach with One of Many over that next year.
What sacrifices did you make? Because at that point, you were already flat out. You had no time. So you must have had to make some sacrifices. What sacrifices did you have to make?
Do you know what? I don't think I actually did make any sacrifices. In some ways, what it did is and I knew I needed something that would call me forward at that point. You can imagine, I didn't know what was happening with my marriage, didn't know what was happening financially, home, all of those things. Yeah. And I knew, and this was like, it was going to be a year of working towards it before I went on the course. And I just knew there was something calling me forward. I needed that point in the future to aim towards. Yeah. And I don't actually think I made any sacrifices. And obviously I did in terms of time. I was lucky that, I say lucky, I was fortunate that the weekends I needed to be away and the week I needed to be away, I managed to sort that out with my ex-husband to have the kids and look after them. But actually, I think it just gave me the sacrifice. If I'm honest, the sacrifice was probably watching rubbish TV.
So you missed that out?
Yeah, which... No wonder I was depressed. At that time, I watched EastEnders, Emmerdale, Coronation Street, Holby City, and Casualty. No wonder I was, burnt out and depressed.
That's why the nation's depressed. We just got rid of all these stupid doctors.
Absolutely. I mean, that was my evening, right? So I don't think I really sacrificed anything. I think what it actually gave me was a really a soul purpose.
I guess your reading time also became much more concentrated.
I was reading the right stuff. And also I started hanging out with cool people. Right. I started having conversation with really strong women. This organization, One of Many, is all about empowering women, and the community of women that I met through that has just, really made such a difference in my life. Still does. I went to their gala celebration. It was their 10th year birthday last month, and that's why Joe released the book this year. But also we had a big gala, and I went along, and there's all these amazing women who've been part of my life now for 8 years, who are all doing amazing things in the world. And so what I gained was so much more than I sacrificed, and actually it just gave me a very wholesome, soul-led, which I wouldn't have had those words back then, purpose, rather than working my guts out for an organization that really couldn't care about me. I was a contractor, but I was working 8-hour days and then getting up at 5 o'clock on a Saturday morning to do more work. It was ridiculous. It was just ridiculous. So all it did, I think, was shift me from doing stuff that really wasn't supporting me to just shifting my focus to something that was calling me forward.
I think there's a bit of a revelation in life as well when you realize if you're working for a larger organization, there's a very subtle difference between you go to work and you're motivated by your own sense of purpose. And as long as that sense of purpose gives you the achievement, and you're able to meet, like today it's like KPIs and sort of getting those key performance factors, and you're doing that, and you want to meet your own personal goals. So there's a sense of personal achievement. But when you get really good at doing that, and you're good at building your team behind you, exactly as you said earlier, and you're also good at inspiring the people above you, you suddenly get to that point in life where you realize, actually, I'm doing all this for them, but it's at that peak that they can't give anything more to me. And unless you go right to the top of that tree, which isn't always easy, and also sometimes people above you start to feel insecure. If you're too good, they become very, very insecure. So I think, and that's the point, which is a real trigger to go, this is my time.
And that's a really interesting point what you just said there about the insecurity. What I recognized, again, I didn't recognize it at the time. I think my subconscious did. I realized I was in a position where I was being kept small, and as much by my own thoughts and beliefs, which is why a lot of the work I do with clients now is about really digging into our limiting beliefs that we create for ourselves, our stories that run the show that are just BS. And actually, I realized that I'd got myself into a position where, exactly like you say, I was freaking amazing, right? And I can say that now and it's not arrogance. It's just an assurance that I was. And actually, I was being kept by my own thoughts and other people's at this place. And I could not see how I was ever going to change it there. And that was one of the other things that I think really drove me forward, was like, I'm going to go and be that. And I'm going to go and be that for me. And I'm going to go and be that with people who want that for me. Saying about the people in my life now, that I don't have anybody in my life, a couple of exceptions, but they kind of have to be there. But generally, I don't have anybody in my life who in any way wants to keep me small. Through their own insecurities, through not believing in me or anything. I just don't have those people in my life anymore, right? If you want to be in my life, and this is how I show up for other people, my clients and other people that I know and love, right? You have got to be here for my greatness. And if you're not, then I'm not, I love you, but no. And that was a massive shift for me.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it many times that if you surround yourself with the right people, then the right things happen.
Yeah.
And it really makes such a difference in life.
Yeah.
The more positive people you have around you, the more positive you'll be.
Yeah.
And you can just develop and grow in that situation, and you'll flourish and you'll thrive.
Yeah. And look, my life now, right? I will say my life is extraordinary and I'm thriving. Does that mean that there's not things going on that are challenging? No. I mean, during this time, that I've been creating this life for myself, my divorce got finalized. I had to sell my home. Sharing with you earlier, Rich, I've moved 3 times in the last 3 years now, right? I'm not a multimillionaire. I don't have money in the bank to do whatever I want with. However, my life now is richer than I have ever experienced in my life because of how I am in it, who's around me, how I live my life, how intentionally I create my experience of life. And I'm now, at that, I'm thriving. Now, there are days that, aren't like that. Right. And the stuff that's gone in my life, like I say, during that time as well, I've lost my dad. My dad passed away from Alzheimer's 6 years ago, anniversary coming up this month. But even that, how I was with my dad in his last few years of his life, which was heartbreaking, but I created it to be an extraordinary experience. And it still is one of the most amazing parts of my life is my story with my dad, and still is afterwards, and how I saw my son show up in that, and how I saw people around me, how I saw people even in that who wanted to have an impact on my life in a bad way. Was a real tell for me of how I wanted my life to be. And I love my dad dearly. He's still with me in every moment. But that this is the thing that's shifted for me, is how I am with life and how I get to create life. And that is a gift that only came from, coming back to that, even though, only really came from the stuff in my life that, on paper doesn't look so great. and the depth of the work I've done on myself, the healing I've done on myself, the coaching, the people I've worked with, the life I've created around me, the gift of that in the depth of work that I can do with my clients is what has me work with some of the most extraordinary people, as my clients, who are creating extraordinary lives that, again, might not be multi-million pound businesses, might not be what other people might see, but I see these people doing extraordinary work, people going through relationship difficulties, people launching podcasts. I've got a lady Lisa, who's just launched her first podcast, which has literally been created in the last 3 or 4 months. She's launched it this week. People who've left jobs to start their own businesses, people who've moved from one part of the world to another to create something new for themselves, people who've just shifted how they are in the world. None of that would be possible if I hadn't lived some of the experiences I've lived. And I think this is one of the things that I love about coaching. Yes, you can be certified. Yes, you can have a coaching qualification, all of that. But it's our lived experience as human beings that really is the gift of coaching, I believe.
Talking about coaching, obviously you said how you get into it, and obviously during your work experience you actually were building to be that. We can notice that nowadays, it's getting really popular. You can see to lots of people this title coach, where, as you said, I don't know if everybody is certified or no or whatever. What you see in terms of coaching, is it becoming a big need for people are looking for coaches? Is it something that, I don't know, when people got a problem years ago, I would say they were going to
a psychiatrist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it something that now it's shifted and people are looking for coaches to help them to get some ideas? What is going on? Because it's full of coaches. How you can choose the right one?
I mean, there's prolific coaches in the world right now, and some of that, and this is is because it's very easy to become qualified as a coach, right? You can go online and get qualified as a coach over a weekend, right?
Oh, okay.
And this, unfortunately, is also driving a lot of not very good quality coaching in the world. Okay, so that is something that I'm not a qualified coach. I'm a certified coach, but I've qualified in my work, in my experience, in my coaching, in everything that's happened with me. And that's something that I really feel passionate about, because it's very easy to get qualified as a coach. It's very different to be a coach. And I've worked with some of the best in the world to be the coach that I am. But, there is a distinction. And it's the first conversations I have with a lot of people is, what's the distinction between, getting, counseling or psychotherapy or psychiatrist or being coached. And to me, one of the big differences is nobody needs a coach is the first thing to say, right? Nobody needs it. And I'm using that word very specifically, because sometimes we do need to get psychiatric help, or we need to get counseling help, or we need to work on some of the things that are going on for us. Coaching is different, because coaching very much looks forward. It's very much about working with the person. So when I'm working with somebody, what I'm doing is I'm looking at what potential they have, what possibilities they have, and I'm always pointing them back to that within themselves, for themselves, to find that for them, to find that hidden potential, to find that hidden dream, to find that spark of interest, and to then look at how do we move this forward. And one of the things I think is really exciting about coaching, and again, I think it's good to talk about this, is you don't have to be at rock bottom to get a coach, right? You don't have to have a problem to get a coach. Right? If you look at some, our top athletes in the world, they have coaches. When they're at the top, you don't see a tennis player doesn't go, right, I'm not a very good tennis player, I'll get a coach until I get good, and then I'll get rid of the coach because I don't need them anymore. The people who are at the top of their game have coaches. So this, I think, is a really good thing to talk about, because I'd love to see more people just deciding that I want to do great things in the world. I'm in a really good place and I want to coach. What tends to happen, it's like, oh, life's got really hard and I need someone to help me fix stuff, and I've got a problem and I need to change things. I'll get a coach. That's valid too, and we can certainly work with people like that, and I love working with people like that. But what I also love is with people who are like, I've got a pretty good life, I'm doing pretty good at where I am in life, and I want to do better. I want to create more. I want to create a legacy. I want to give something back. You know, I have a client that I'm working with at the moment who's like, I have everything I want in life, but what I'm really interested in is creating a legacy. How do I share everything that I've learned, everything I've done in my life with other people? How do I create something that's going to be a long-lasting legacy? So coaching is all of those things. It, you know, and there's a place for counseling, there's a place for psychotherapy, and there's a place for all the other things. And I've had therapy. I've worked with EMDR people. I've worked with hypnotherapists to support my work. For me, when I work with a coach, it's about really going within, finding what's going on for me, and then having somebody who's going to help me draw all that out, create from there. And that to me is what really, really exciting coaching is about.
I think when Simon Sinek, in one of his books, I think he's got like he talks about finite in terms of industry and infinite. And obviously, from a business point of view, you know, a company that's evolving and growing has an infinite ability to thrive. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that coaching does and mentoring does for people, however good you are, you're always having an off day. Mm-hmm. And it's always it's about keeping key performance in your own mentality to make sure that you don't miss out on those things. Mm-hmm. And having that mentor and coach, I'm sure, all the way through, keeping you on that top level, because otherwise imposter syndrome kicks in.
Yeah, because we're human,
and you
right?
come back down again.
Yeah,
and you'll have bad days.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, you know, coaching is not pushing. You know, it sounds like it's all about pushing forward, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about sitting with someone and saying, what's really going on here? Because as human beings, like you say, we have imposter syndrome. We have all these voices come into our head. You can't do this. Who do you think you are to do this? All of those things happen. And sometimes we have a voice that's like, keep going, keep pushing, keep striving, keep trying, right? And sometimes a coach will be the person who says, what's going on there, right? What are you avoiding by being so busy that you can't just be with yourself, right? So sometimes coaching is really getting people to slow down and really getting people to see that a lot of our habits and behaviors are because we can't be with ourselves. And if we're not with ourselves, we don't really tune into the truth of who we are. You know, and like I said, I fell into recruitment, and 30 years later, I'm still working with recruiters. You know, we make all these life choices that can then lead us into a life that we didn't really, not we didn't really want, but we didn't create. We didn't consciously create. And sometimes a coach is just going to be someone who says, "Look, you're doing great here. Is it making you happy? Right? Are you fulfilled?" You know, and often a coach can be the person who says, okay, there's nothing wrong with what you've created so far, but you know what, how do you want to live the rest of your life? And sometimes that is people going, okay, I'm burning down everything I've built, businesses, you know, work with people who've literally gone, this business is hugely successful, but it doesn't light my soul up anymore. And you know what, I've lived 50 years of my life, I want the next 50 to be soulful. And that was part of my journey to Steve Hardison, and who's the ultimate coach. He is the ultimate coach. I love him dearly. You know, his thing is all about who we're being and what we're creating. And one of my intentions when I went over to see him in Phoenix and had my 2-hour Be With session with him was, I've lived an amazing first 50 years of my life. So my trip over to see him was my 50th birthday present to myself. I'm not going to negate, change, belittle anything I've done in the first 50 years of my life. You know, there are choices that I might have made differently, etc. But ultimately, I have 3 beautiful boys, and none of my 3 boys would not exist on this planet if I hadn't made every single choice I've made up till now. So I'm never going to negate what I've done, but I really recognize that a lot of it was created by default, not by design. It was created subconsciously. 95% of the world is walking around subconsciously subconsciously creating their world by default. And I wanted to be in the 5% of the world who went, I'm going to consciously create the rest of my life. And that is something that coaching has offered me, that ability to go, hang on, what is going on here? I want to create. I want to consciously decide how my life is going to be. And that's been a big thing for me. And that's what I bring in my work with people, is there's nothing wrong with any of you. There's nothing to fix, nothing to change. Yes, okay, there might be some healing work that people need to do, and they might have, but actually, You have everything that you need. You are absolutely perfect as you are. What is it your soul desires you to do? And how do we create that in your life? And that might be for some people setting the world on fire, right? And for other people, it could be having a really peaceful life where they live in a beautiful location. We talked about, Rich, obviously you moving to Whitstable, really beautiful location where their days are made up of them spending time in nature, writing, reading, whatever. A very simple life. If that's what's calling their soul forward, that's what we'll create for them.
Absolutely.
And that's been my journey, and that's what I bring to my work with
You're
people.
really changing my perspective for coaching, because I will be honest, if you open LinkedIn, obviously it's a bit like the same algorithms on everywhere. If you like something, or you share, or you comment, and suddenly you get lots in your feed about. And honestly, there was a moment like coach. And I think, like, what's going on? Is 90% of the people coaches? But and yeah, my thought was as well that only if you are in need, then you go for. So thank you for explaining all this, because it's really different perspective. And you mentioned in the conversation that you are having coach, or you were having coaches as well, which means that, and I like this with the sport people and anyone. You really don't stop. You always carry on. So,
and I could not be a coach coaching other people if I wasn't being coached myself. Right. And this is what I've learned from the masters in coaching. Steve Hardison, Steve Chandler is another amazing coach, known as the godfather of coaching, and many other people that I've worked with. I could not coach other people if I wasn't being coached myself, because and I think this is where you'll find a lot of coaches don't. And for me, my coaching, and this is not a judgment on anyone else. For me personally, my coaching is a calling. It's my superpower, right? It's who I am at my very core. And that's why when I look back over my career and could see it in everything, and as well the leadership, I'm a leader and I'm a coach. That's who I am. And that is it comes out in everything that I do. But to be the best version of myself, I will always be coached, always. And, the top athletes, they don't just get coached by one coach, right? They get coached on they change it because they want to change up their game. They want to change up their mindset. But also you look at the top athletes now, they'll have a coach for their mindset. They'll have a coach for their, whichever sport they happen to be in. They'll have a fitness coach. They'll have a nutritional coach, right? And again, this is like comes back to, I think, the very quite British thing is we see it as if we have a coach, there's something wrong.
We're weak.
That we haven't got everything we need. And that's the bit I'd love to shift with people, because actually the people who are at the top of their game, whatever that game is, right? Business, life, sport, whatever, are the very same people who know to ask for help in a good way. So it's not because they're lacking. It's like, how do I, if I'm a tennis player, how do I get from here to here, right? Well, I need to look at what the gap is there, right? How do I improve my sleep, for example? How do I improve my nutrition? And that's exactly the same for business people, right? You go and look at, and you know this, Rich, you've been working in business for 30 odd years, right? How many people do you know in leadership roles, right, who are supposed to be leading businesses, leading teams, leading people, who aren't eating well, right? Aren't sleeping well, are drinking too much, aren't eating, aren't their relationships with their teams and in their lives are not good.
They tend to get more emotional and more angry and more upset.
Absolutely right. They are not looking after themselves, so they are able to lead other people. And that, I think, is one of the things that I'd love more, and I work with some extraordinary people. I'd love to work with more people who are like, they see how them being a leader in the world, whatever their version of the world is, that actually begins with looking after themselves, knowing themselves, looking into their blind spots, looking into their dark shadows that nobody wants to look in, and really looking at that and thinking, how do I show up for my families, my communities, my teams, whatever it is you're doing in life, to be the best possible version of myself? I think most of these
people, a lot of business leaders today, are drowning in pressure.
Absolutely.
Because to be honest, like every single business is under immense pressure. The world is in a difficult balance at the moment. that it starts with the media, and the media have a negative context.
Oh, absolutely.
And once they set that context, if the media suddenly change the direction, everyone's suddenly become positive, then it lifts, and then business starts to tick back up again. But it's very hard, I think, where every company is under pressure in terms of to hit goals. There's pressure because they don't have the finances. People don't have enough money to be able to cope with it. But that pressure builds up and builds up. And then what tends to happen is companies reduce the number of people. Then
so the pressure gets greater.
Yeah, the pressure gets greater. And then the business leaders literally drown.
Yeah.
And in terms of and having personal coaches is something that then is harder for them to find a coach to better help them through that situation. And then they probably feel as if, I'd love a coach, but I don't have time to have a coach.
Well, and
there's
the
self-sacrifice.
Exactly. We come again to the point that
it's
you don't have time, but you will find the time if you
commit to it. If you commit to it, and you've got to make it important enough. And I think you raised some really good points there. One of the next epidemic that's hitting us and is already in place is loneliness.
Yeah.
So these same leaders, like you say, under massive pressure, are also becoming the loneliest people on our planet because they've disconnected from themselves. They don't feel there's anyone they can talk to because they can't talk to their teams about all of this. They can't talk to their spouses often or partners or friends because they feel weak. And often because those relationships aren't great either. So they can't because it's got to the point where, they're not talking to each other. In my marriage, I recognize that, my husband and I stopped talking to each other because our relationship wasn't good. He was struggling at work. I was struggling at work, but we couldn't communicate about it. Right. But also something you said there as well is, they're under a massive pressure and a lot of it comes from the media.
Yep.
So one of the other things that my style of coaching and that I've learned is around this version of reported world versus created world. Okay. One of the problems we have is that we live in a reported world. And what I mean by that is we've got this constant noise of being told what's going on in the world. Now, I'm not going to get too political about this or into media and what, fake news and all of that. But even without that, if we live in a world where we're being told everything, like a reported world, so even our own narrative, like you're not good enough to do this, who are you to do this? No one's going to believe you, no one's going to trust you, all of those things. It's a reported world. The big shift in the work that I do is we get rid of all of that noise, we come back to who you are, and we start creating a world from there. Now, if some of these business leaders, and this is not me boasting about my coaching, but it's my belief of what really good coaching can do for people. If even half of those business leaders slowed down, stopped listening to the reported world around them, got a coach, worked with a coach, worked on themselves first, the old oxygen mask on first, and really looked at how are they showing up in their relationships? How are they showing up in their business? How are they looking after themselves? They would and who they're being as leaders in this world, and leaders in their world. And if we really looked at that, a lot of their problems would disappear. They would have a new energy, but also they would start creating something different in their world. They would start showing up for their meetings with different agendas. They'd start showing up in their conversations with their family differently. They'd start communicating in a way that encouraged and developed people. The trouble is when we feel under pressure, what happens? We shout and we scream and we get pissed off with people and we push people too hard. And then you get burnout. It spreads like a ripple.
You get this plug hole effect and everything starts to go into that pressure pool.
Yeah. So you take those leaders, take them out of that situation, spend time with them, get them to look after themselves, get them to start seeing how they're creating their world by default, which is it's tough, it's hard. Nobody does what I want them to do. And you start going, okay, well, let's have a look at how you're showing up in all of that. How are you communicating with people? Are you acknowledging your team for what they are doing? I was having this conversation with someone yesterday who's got a business and they're struggling at the moment. And I realized as I'm listening to them that everything they're talking about is what we're not doing. So I said, right, I just want to flip this the other way. Can you tell me what your team are doing? Let's just slow down and look at what you actually are doing. And suddenly it went from we've got 30% inaccuracy to we've got 70% accurate in our data. And suddenly I'm like, can you see how amazing that is? And how do you think your team are going to show up in that project now when you communicate from a place of we've got 70% accuracy? That is incredible. I really want to acknowledge each and every one of you for being part of getting to 70%. Okay, who's got ideas about how we go from 70% to 80%? I said, you watch the difference in your team literally overnight when you shift that thinking. But what do most of our businesses go and do at this point when they're so much under pressure? What aren't you doing? What aren't we doing? Where aren't we getting sales? Who are the clients you haven't spoken to? All of that. You just literally shift that overnight to, how about we acknowledge them for what they have done?
It does sound easy, but we can see, and we spoke with lots of people on this podcast, and very often we end up that in the corporate world, lots of people found difficulties, and that's why they take changes.
But the corporate world, just to really put this into context, right? We talk about the corporate world like it's some great big entity, right? The corporate world is made up of people.
Correct.
Yes.
It's people. It's not corporations. It's people. It's leaders. It's individual people, managers, leaders, owners.
Just one thing I don't understand, but probably I'm too down on the ladder. I don't know. Sometimes we go in nice places, so you speak with different people, and honestly, sometimes I don't understand how just being some high position leader need to make it to be so different and so special, and to start with these very specific requirements, and then suddenly you start to have that huge gap between senior leaders or whatever, some people on top who are I don't know, the top ones, and you've got the people down, or this is something normal that you need to have that gap and people need to feel it. I don't know.
Well, I think it's very old style leadership. You talk about, my name, my strapline, the Queen of Heart-led Leadership was a title that was given to me. Someone just put a comment on a post one day and I thought, well, that's cool, I'll have that. But, a lot of that came from some work I've done around heart-led leadership. The reason you've got those structures that you're talking about, and they do exist, is because for so many years, decades, right, we've seen leadership as it has to be separate. You can't bring yourself to leadership. You have to be above the people that you're leading. You can't be vulnerable, right? You can't get it wrong, right? You can't ask questions, right? You have to have it absolutely nailed, right? And that's why you get that big gap. But that's also why that epidemic I was talking about loneliness is happening, is because these people are up here on their own. They haven't got a clue. And I don't mean that as a criticism or a judgment of them. It's just they have put themselves on a pedestal so far away from everybody else. And now they can't say, I really don't know what to do.
It's like
right?
that.
You must see this with a lot of people that you
absolutely.
work with, right? But actually, if we come back to, they're still people. Right? So what about if we just look at everybody as people, and we look at their inherent skills and what they can bring to the table, and we start as leaders sitting around a table with people going, okay, I'm leading this company here, and this is where we are, and this is where we need to get to, and I'm not sure I've got all the answers of how we get there. Right? Now, that's a very difficult thing for most of these people who've put themselves up on a pedestal to do. Guess what happens when you do, though? Those people in the room, and this is why where I did the role that I did back in Hayes, I was, in terms of payment and structure, I was here, like I was down here somewhere, and the leaders were up here somewhere. But guess what? They started talking to me and saying, what can you see, Rebecca, that I can't see here? And that everyone has those people in their teams around them. You just sat with your team and you said, look, guys, I really want to acknowledge us for where we've got to, but we really need to get here. This is my vision. This is where I want us to get to. And I don't know how to get there. Most leaders would find that a very hard sentence to say, but the richness and the gold and the innovation and the inspiration they get if most people did that with their teams. And it might not happen overnight. Sometimes it does. But if they did that continuously and people felt that they could come to their leaders with ideas, and
because if they feel part of the whole thing, of course they're going to have the contribution. Again, we talk about the right people, because as everything in life, there are people who are absolutely okay to go 9 till 5 and just go home and they don't care. But I'm sure there are people who got the vibes, they want to shine, they want to do it, and they've got the skills. So
and there's
just
some
one
of this
conversation can change the whole path for everyone.
And some of those people that are going home 9 to 5 saying they don't care are those people, by the way. It's just because of the structures that they work in, they don't feel there's anywhere else, so they don't want to, so they do 9 to 5 because actually they don't feel like they can give anything.
Because you know what, I think we've seen this year, and on our second podcast we went up to Derbyshire and we met up with Keeley from Soccer Tech, And she is an absolute epitome of how a leader does it right. Honestly, we met her. I mean, first of all, and we've said it before, but I always say, like, if you meet an accountant or like financial management people, they tend to be a bit boring. They're a bit they're a bit black and white. They're not very grey. She was completely opposite. She has incredible energy, and her ability to lead her team not only was clear from what she said,
we've seen it.
We saw it in practice, because when we walked into the company, and we said, we'll come to Keely. Oh, Keely, she's lovely. And everyone we met,
from reception
the all the way through, it was incredible.
And you can see it. She doesn't need to talk about it. You just see the energy.
And that's the difference between what I call a modern leader who sees the way to develop a team, and she knew that her responsibility was to make sure that her people, when they came into work, were ready to do the job, so they could focus, wash away their problems of, we've all got stuff at home that's going on, but how to clear your head, how to get into that atmosphere to be able to thrive. And she had that ability to be able to motivate her team. And bless her, she's since then she's been promoted again to an even higher situation. And it goes to show that that's the key. But she wasn't drowning because she made the time, and she managed to get her balance.
She may have a coach. We never spoke about that.
We never did.
Maybe.
No.
And I was on a webinar the other day, and not coaching per se, but talking about coaching and mentoring. It was more about mentoring, actually. And this was an amazing stat that I found. And this is, maybe something for anyone who's listening to really think about in their own organization. If you're a leader or you're in an organization that you'd like to be doing more in, they gave some amazing stats. I can't remember where it came from, but let's just assume it's right for a minute, because, it's inspiring. So let's just believe it. Is if you are being mentored by somebody, okay, and I would hazard a guess it's probably the same for coaching, but let's just say it's mentoring, right? So if you're being mentored by somebody, so somebody who's been where you are a few steps ahead and is calling you forward through the conversations that you're having with them, mentoring is fabulous to have. You are 4 times more likely to progress in your career in terms of promotion and moving forward, money, and all the things that come with it, right? So this was in organizations. So if you're being mentored, 4 times more likely to move forward, right? If you are mentoring somebody else, which is very much around the right kind of leadership, seeing the best in people, giving time to other people to call them forward, right, which is another great sign of leadership in my world, right? So if you're mentoring somebody else, you are 5 times more likely to be promoted, move forward in your career. Those numbers alone, if you're sat anywhere in, whether you're working for yourself, whether you're working in a business, have a think about those numbers. So if you were to go and be mentored by someone or be coached, because I would hazard a guess the coaching is about the same, right? Let's just assume it is for it. Go and get a coach, go and get a mentor, right? And you don't always have to pay for it. I mean, I'm a professional coach. I charge money for my coaching services, and most coaches do. But there are often people in your organization who will coach you, right? They want to coach. They maybe want to coach when they leave their job. They do it subconsciously. I did that for many years, right? So, if you think 4 times more likely to progress, to create the life that you love through the vehicle that you've chosen to work in, go and get yourself a coach or a mentor. Go and ask. Just ask anyone, right? Go and be willing to ask. 4 times more likely. And then you become 5 times it, go and be that for somebody else, right? And this is what we're missing, because people don't do that, and leaders don't do that, because they're so in their, on their pedestals, all the reported world of how bad everything is. And like you say, the press and the media are awful at this, right? And this is the other reason I don't watch the news anymore. I don't tune into it at all. I try and avoid it if I can, because in my world, it's like I get to create my world as I want to create it. If I keep buying into the noise that, everything's doomed, everything's awful, then that's what I'm going to create. You
may as well close the door and shut the door and stay at home all day.
Exactly. So what I do is I choose to be in a world where I see more love than hate.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Where I believe, and I know there's some atrocious things going on in the world right now, and it's not that I ignore them, it's just that from where I am, I can't influence that. But what I can do is I can show up in my world with a different way of being and make a difference in the lives of the people that I serve, either through my friendships or my work, right? So I can show up there. If I get too caught up in all that noise, all that reported world, all this awfulness that's going on, I ain't going to show up like that. So I clean that out so I can show up. And I know that the difference I'm making in the people's lives around me is rippling out into the world. And if we all focused on that, the world would become a better place. Definitely. If we stop judging, criticizing, hating on each other, the world would change overnight. And I know that sounds like a really bold, cliched statement, but it's 100% true. Right. And Steve Hardison, who I've mentioned a couple of times, the ultimate coach, I love dearly. One of his things is he loves everybody. That's his default position. He'd love you. If he came and sat in this room with you, he would love you. He would talk to you. He'd love you. And he often gets criticized. How can you say you love me? You don't even know me. He said, I see in the world people hating people that they don't know. You know, you only have to turn the news on to see how much hate there is for each other. You only have to go on social media to see the trolls and the hate that gets on people that they don't know. I mean, I left Twitter or X or whatever it's called these days a long time ago, because all I could see was people hating on each other and finding ways to nitpick at each other and pull people down. He said, if people can hate people they don't know, then I sure can love people that I don't know. He said, and that's my default position. You know, I will love you unconditionally because I love people. And if everybody in the world came from that standpoint, and that's where I'm coming to, and I don't get it right every day, right? There are people in my world that I find it very hard to love some days. And yet that's what I come back to. I try and come back to. And when I meet new people like you guys, I love you, right? Yeah, until you give me a reason not to, I love you. And you'd have to give me a really good reason not to. Because if you did something that I didn't love, then I would have that conversation with you. Of course. Right. And I'd say, let's click, what's going on here? Let's have a conversation about this. And that has made a massive difference in my life as well. And I honestly, it sounds like a bold statement. If we loved more, judged less, and went deep with people in our conversation and our interactions, the world would change. And that's something that I'm going to keep believing in until I see the world making those changes. Because I refuse to just tune into all the awful stuff that's going on in the world, because that's what we hear about. I can't remember what it was on.
It's happening lots of good things.
Absolutely,
as well,
but we don't hear about them, right? Because the thing is, the press, the media, governments, the organisations want to keep us in fear, right? Because when we're in fear, we're much easier to manage, right? So there was, I can't remember what it was on. There's a comedian who's sort of combined personal development coaching with being a comedian. He's great. I can't remember his name, but there was a thing that he did, and it always stuck with me, and I love this story. He said, can you imagine if like you're watching the TV and every time a plane landed successfully, you got a news flash. Plane landed successfully at Heathrow, right? Plane landed successfully at Gatwick, right?
Minute.
Yeah, it would be all the time. You know, you wouldn't be able to watch anything because it'd be constant like plane. What happens when a plane crashes? Straight away, news. 300 people killed in a plane crash today. We only get the bad news, and our minds, our the science in our brains, it has not developed at the speed at which our world has developed technologically, right? Our brains are pretty much the same as they were when we were cavemen, all right? So when we were cavemen and women, you know, we'd walk outside the cave, there'd be a beautiful flower here, and there'd be a cave lion here, right? Our brain is wired that there's a cave lion there that's about to eat us. So we act from the place of we're about to be eaten. So we don't have time to look at the nice flower, right? We're still living like that, except the cave lions are what people think about us, whether people are going to judge us, whether we're going to get, you know, put something out on social media and it's going to crash, whether we create a podcast and no one watches it. They become the cave lions, and our brains are still wired to always go to the negative, right?
But so we've got the power to...
Absolutely, that's part of the creative world. What if we create a world where I start recreating my neural pathways to go towards all the things that are great in life? And that's what I'm working on for myself. And it's a work in progress, mountain without a top. I'll be doing it for the rest of my life.
Rebecca, trust me, people around you can feel the vibes. It is different around you. Even last Saturday, we were watching the game together, had a little bit chat, obviously now in different ways since we know each other, but it's different. Even today, you walking in the room, it's different. You bring different vibes, and whoever want to tell me whatever they want about the positivity, some people just got it. And when you're really it's not like this lush thing you go and you talk somewhere, oh, I'm positive, or positive thoughts and etc. No, when you are really line up with that and you feel it and you do it, it's just coming with you wherever you go, wherever you do. It's just bringing
we
that.
said yesterday, it's like walking into a room and having a smile.
Yeah.
If you walk into a room and smile, you immediately
Changing.
bring a positivity into the room. Even if everyone else has got the straightest, miserable faces, and you walk in and say, good morning, with a smile, wow.
Yeah.
The room
At
will
least
just
few
lift.
people you will be touched. There are lots of nice videos around in social medias how this small kind gesture suddenly start people first of all look at you a bit weird, but then suddenly it touches everybody a little bit.
And coming back to something you said there is, this is possible for everyone. I mean, I love that you acknowledge me for how I show up and that things are different. That is possible for everyone, right?
Absolutely.
I'm not special in that. I've just done the work on it. And there are days where I don't show up like that. I promise you, right?
Sure.
There are days where I don't. But we can bring about it in all sorts of ways. Like you say, just walking in and smiling at people, making eye contact with people, that can make a big difference. And also, and I love that we're code pink today, right? Part of my pink energy has come from me realizing that even that lifts me, right? Lifts how I feel when I wear pink or any of the bright colors that I love wearing, right? How I show up in the world creates an energy. So just showing up, and it's not about vanity, it's about just wearing things that lift me up, right? I feel better when I'm like this. And I did a great event with an organization called Richmond Events, and it was for logistics people, and they basically do like a 2-day conference. It's brilliant at the Belfry in up near Birmingham. Brilliant conference, great, but in logistics and supply chain management. And I was invited to go and be a coach there. So basically they have lots of speakers and workshops, and then they have a couple of coaches there where people can just book in and come and do like a power hour with me, right? So it was fabulous, great event, really well organized. And we had breakfast on the first morning, and a keynote speaker, Matthew Syed, who's a personal development coach and used to be a table tennis champion, is a table tennis champion. And when I walked into this breakfast room, so massive great room, I think there was about 400 or 500 people in there, right? And he's up there on stage. And I walked in and I had a bright green dress on with pink flowers on it. I had bright pink nails. I had pink shoes on, right? I was me, right? I looked around the room and it was all greys and blacks and blues. And I'm not even kidding. It was literally, and I sat down at this table and immediately like these couple of people popped up and started talking to me. And one of them said to me, she said, oh my gosh, she said, I can't believe I've ended up sitting next to you. She said, I was really drawn to your color. She said, who shows up at an event like this with bright pink nail varnish? And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're still having these conversations, right? Where people feel they have to be grey in this world. And she said, and now I know why I've been called. She said, I've got a coaching session with you later. I booked in. And she said, and I can't believe I've ended up sitting next to you. She said, but what drew me to you was in a room full of grey, you were standing out, right? And again, this is how we can show up in the world so that the world notices us. Going back to this idea of manifesting and law of attraction, right? You walk into a room and you're the person that smiles, or you're the person that has got a beautiful pink check shirt on. People, and it's not even conscious. A lot of it is subconscious. They don't realize, but they're just like, oh, that person, I like that person. I want to go spend time with that person. So thinking about how we show up in the world is really important. And that's why for me, like the way I show up, the colors I wear, I've been working with a personal stylist this year about how I show up, how I bring some other colors other than pink into my world, but really thinking about it makes a difference, and it makes a difference to people at a subconscious level. And my stylist always laughs because she's like, so many people come up to me and go, who is that person that you've been working with? I so want to work with her. I don't even know what she does, but I want to work with her because she's bright pink and bright orange, and that color just popped out. And that to me, it might seem like a shallow thing to talk about, but look at that difference that is made. And I've got clients who are now working with me because they saw a picture of me showing up, looking as I am, right? I've found a way to really express who I am through what I wear, how I show up on social media. And so And everyone has that possibility,
Of course.
right? So it's just like, go work with a coach to find it, or just go and read some great books, hang around with great people, show up at an event where you'd normally wear black and wear your best bright blue dress if you have a blue dress, right? And just see what happens when you show up in the world differently.
It is. Well, I think we
Rebecca,
can carry on and carry on so much. You were great inspiration. Thank you for the book. Thank you for everything, and thank you for showing up in our lives. Honestly,
thank you so much.
And I'm so grateful that you're in Faversham. That yes, you're not far away, and I'm pretty sure we'll meet more and more. But yeah, it was.
This is the beginning.
Great. Yeah,
this is the beginning.
Really hope
Thank
to.
you so much.
Thanks for bringing all this pink and powerful, positive vibes. So people dream big. Do the step ahead and just know that everything is possible. It's all depend on us, and always try to surround yourself with the right people. If someone is not right for you, or if you are not on the right place, just make the step. Go and try to find your people. You'll feel them.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for being with us this morning. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. We thank you also to Hempstead House for hosting us again, our amazing host. Again, if you're in this part of Kent, near Sittingbourne, then it's an amazing hotel to stay at. It's great food and incredible hospitality. And the people who work here, as they've shown us this morning by looking after us so well, it's just an incredible place to be. If you're watching us on YouTube, we do hope that you would give us a like, and please do subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, please do give us a follow, and we look forward to another exciting episode with our next guest on the Meet Your Inspiration podcast. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.